The night air hung heavy over the deck of the Admiral sheer, the sea around the English Channel shrouded in a thick mist that seemed to swallow even the faintest glimmers of light. Within the ship's secure conference room, a small group of senior naval officers gathered in near silence, the gravity of the moment barely concealed beneath the formal decorum. Admiral Wilhelm Canaris, known for his measured demeanor and sharp intellect, sat at the head of the table, his face an unreadable mask as he listened to the latest intelligence reports. The usual confidence that had buoyed German naval aspirations in recent months was notably absent. Instead, a palpable tension gripped the room, a subtle but unmistakable shift in mood that foreshadowed the doubts beginning to take root in the Admiral's mind. The secret meeting had been convened under strict orders, away from prying eyes and ears, precisely because the information to be discussed threatened to upend the carefully constructed narrative of imminent victory in the English Channel. The Kriegsmarine, still basking in the afterglow of early wartime successes, had long held a firm belief that control of this vital waterway was within reach. Yet now, as the intelligence officers unfurled their maps and reports, the stark reality began to surface, one that challenged the very core of German naval strategy. "Admiral," began Captain zur See Ernst Lindemann, his voice steady but edged with concern, "the latest reconnaissance confirms that British naval forces have reinforced their patrols. The Royal Navy's destroyer flotillas are operating with increased coordination, supported by persistent air patrols that complicate our surface movements significantly." Canaris nodded slowly, his eyes narrowing as he absorbed the words. The room was momentarily silent, each officer weighing the implications. The English Channel, that narrow strip of water separating Britain from the continent, was no longer a mere battleground for occasional skirmishes. It had evolved into a heavily fortified zone, where every German maneuver was met with swift and effective countermeasures. Reports also indicate, added Oberleutnant zur See Hans Meyer, the intelligence officer, that the British have integrated the use of radar technology with remarkable efficiency. "Our attempts to approach undetected have been thwarted repeatedly, forcing us into defensive postures more often than not." The mention of radar elicited a subtle but significant reaction. It was a technological advantage that the Kriegsmarine had underestimated, a silent sentinel that pierced the veil of darkness and mist, revealing German vessels long before they could close in. The consequences were immediate and dire. Surprise attacks that had been the cornerstone of naval strategy were rendered ineffective. Canaris cleared his throat, breaking the uneasy silence. "The assumption that we could assert control through sheer audacity and superior tactics is proving increasingly tenuous," he remarked, his voice low but resolute. "Our intelligence must be precise. We cannot afford to gamble on optimism when the enemy has adapted so rapidly." Throughout the meeting, detailed intelligence reports were presented, each adding layers to a picture that grew bleaker with every passing moment. The German Navy's limited naval resources were starkly contrasted with the Royal Navy's numerical superiority and their rigid control over critical sea lanes. The British had not only maintained a formidable fleet but had also perfected convoy systems that shielded merchant and military vessels alike behind protective screens of escort ships and air cover. The officers reviewed intercepted communications, debriefings from reconnaissance pilots, and captured documents, all pointing toward a single unsettling conclusion: the Kriegsmarine's early confidence was misplaced. The English Channel was no longer a theater where the German surface fleet could operate with impunity. "Admiral," said Captain zur See Friedrich von Müller, a veteran of North Sea patrols, "our reliance on U-boats and surface raiders is proving insufficient in the face of these defenses. Convoy tactics, combined with relentless air reconnaissance, have neutralized many of our recent operations. The Channel's narrow confines favor the defender, and our losses mount accordingly." Canaris's gaze lingered on the map before him, tracing the intricate network of British patrols and minefields that choked the waters. The strategic implications were clear: a prolonged campaign would strain German resources and morale, and the hope for swift victory might remain elusive. The Admiral's thoughts drifted to earlier months when the Kriegsmarine had envisioned a rapid dominance of the Channel, leveraging surprise and concentrated force to overcome British naval presence. Those expectations now seemed naive, almost reckless in hindsight. The reality of sustained British resistance and technological superiority had shattered the illusion of an assured triumph. A junior officer cleared his throat hesitantly. "Sir, there are reports from our coastal observers indicating increased British air sorties over the Channel, with fighter cover now extending well beyond their usual patrol zones." Canaris's eyes hardened. "Air superiority in this region is a critical factor," he acknowledged grimly. "Without control of the skies, our surface fleet remains vulnerable to constant harassment and attrition." The room fell into a contemplative silence. The initial optimism that had fueled the Kriegsmarine's plans was now tempered by a growing awareness of the formidable obstacles ahead. Whispered conversations about possible adjustments to tactics surfaced briefly but were quickly stifled by the weight of uncertainty. "This meeting changes everything we believed about our chances," Canaris finally said, his tone carrying the somber realization that the path forward would demand caution and adaptability rather than boldness. "We must reconsider our strategy in light of these intelligence reports. Victory in the Channel is no longer assured." As the officers dispersed into the shadows of the night, the Admiral remained seated, the flickering light casting deep shadows across his lined face. The secret meeting had exposed vulnerabilities and sown seeds of doubt that would ripple through the corridors of Naval Command. The contrast between expectation and reality had become painfully clear. The Kriegsmarine's confidence was shaken, and with it, the very prospects of controlling the English Channel in the coming months. The implications of that night's meeting extended far beyond the walls of the Admiral Shear. It marked a pivotal moment when the veneer of certainty was stripped away, revealing the harsh truths beneath. Intelligence reports, once dismissed as mere caution, now demanded urgent attention. The balance of power in the Channel was shifting, and German Naval Command faced the daunting task of navigating this new, uncertain reality. The echo of Canaris's quiet doubts would resonate in subsequent operations, influencing decisions and tempering ambitions. This clandestine gathering, though hidden from public view, changed the course of German naval strategy, an inflection point where hope yielded to sober calculation, and the fragile thread of confidence began to unravel. The morning after the secret meeting aboard the Admiral Shear, the chill of the English Channel seemed to seep deeper into the bones of the Kriegsmarine officers as they reconvened to assess the broader strategic landscape. The prior night's revelations had cast a long shadow over their calculations, demanding a more detailed examination of the British defences that now loomed as an imposing barrier to German ambitions. As dawn broke over the restless waters, an air of sober analysis replaced the earlier tension, yet beneath it lay a growing apprehension that the Channel might not be the contested prize the German Navy had once envisioned. The strategic context was, in truth, daunting. The Royal Navy's supremacy in the Channel was underpinned by a combination of factors that the Kriegsmarine could neither easily match nor circumvent. Admiral Canaris and his staff pored over intelligence reports, technical assessments, and strategic briefings, each piece reinforcing the stark reality of the British advantage. The Channel, a narrow but vital maritime corridor, was heavily patrolled and defended, its approaches guarded by a network of warships, coastal batteries, radar installations, and airfields, all synchronized in a formidable defensive web. "The Royal Navy's control is comprehensive," noted Captain Zur C. Lindemann during a briefing. "Their destroyer flotillas outnumber our surface vessels by nearly 3-to-1 in this sector. Coupled with their cruisers and battleships stationed further out, their capacity to project power is significant." His voice was steady, but the gravity of the disparity was unmistakable. Germany's surface fleet, while well-trained and experienced, lacked the numerical strength to challenge the British directly in these confined waters. Moreover, the Germans faced a technological disadvantage that compounded their difficulties. The effective integration of radar into British naval and air operations had transformed the Channel into a near-impenetrable zone of detection and response. This early warning system afforded the Royal Navy and the Royal Air Force precious minutes to mobilize against any German attempt to penetrate their defenses. Radar coverage extends along the entire southern English coast and into the Channel itself, Oberleutnant Zur C. Meyer explained, pointing to charts detailing the overlapping detection zones. This network allows for coordinated air patrols that continuously surveil our movements. Our vessels are exposed long before they reach effective striking range. The significance of this cannot be overstated. The Kriegsmarine's previous experience in surface engagements had relied heavily on surprise and rapid concentration of force. The British radar system, still a relatively novel innovation, disrupted these tactics by stripping away the element of stealth. German ships were forced into a reactive stance, often compelled to evade rather than engage, their operational freedom severely curtailed. Adding to the complexity was the British mastery of convoy tactics. Merchant shipping, essential for sustaining the war effort and the economy, was shielded by well-organized escort groups. These convoys moved in tight formations, protected by destroyers, corvettes, and aircraft that patrolled the skies and seas alike. The Kriegsmarine's attempts to interdict these convoys had met with limited success, as British escorts were adept at countermeasures, including aggressive anti-submarine warfare. "The convoy system is a force multiplier," remarked von Muller during a strategic session. It allows the British to concentrate their limited escort assets where they are most needed, effectively neutralizing our U-boat threats and surface raiders alike. This assessment was corroborated by recent operational reports. German U-boats, long heralded as the spearhead of naval disruption, found themselves increasingly constrained. British air reconnaissance, launched from coastal bases and carriers, scoured the channel relentlessly, forcing submarines to submerge prematurely and limiting their effectiveness. Surface raiders, meanwhile, faced the constant threat of interception and attrition. The juxtaposition of German limitations and British strengths painted a grim picture. Where the Kriegsmarine had anticipated a theater of opportunity, the reality was one of strategic entrenchment. The British Naval Command had not only anticipated German moves but had adapted swiftly to counter them with layered defenses and technological superiority. Surface engagement in the Channel is becoming a matter of attrition rather than decisive action, Canaris observed during a confidential briefing. Our vessels are exposed to concentrated firepower and air attacks. Without significant air support and reinforcements, sustaining operations here will be untenable. The Admiral's words echoed the growing consensus among his officers. The earlier belief that the Channel could be dominated through bold offensive maneuvers was now tempered by the clear evidence of British preparedness and resilience. The Kriegsmarine's limited resources, both in terms of ships and aircraft, were stretched thin, and the prospect of reinforcing the fleet to match British strength was remote given competing priorities elsewhere. In this context, the Channel's narrow geography, once considered advantageous for quick strikes and ambushes, became a liability. The confined waters facilitated British defensive coordination, allowing rapid concentration of forces against any German incursion. Minefields, both newly laid and long established, further restricted movement, channeling German vessels into predictable paths where British patrols lay in wait. Intelligence reports underscored the severity of these constraints. Intercepted communications revealed British fleet movements timed to counter perceived German sorties, while aerial reconnaissance data provided detailed maps of German naval dispositions and minefield locations. The British command's ability to integrate these sources into a unified operational picture far outpaced German efforts. Their intelligence apparatus is formidable, Meyer noted grimly. They exploit every advantage, turning information into decisive action. As the day wore on, the officers discussed potential countermeasures. Suggestions ranged from increased U-boat patrols beyond the Channel's confines to attempts at disrupting British radar installations by covert operations. Yet, each proposal carried its own risks and limitations, highlighting the precariousness of the German position. Canaris remained circumspect. "We must be realistic," he cautioned. "Our strengths lie in submarine warfare and commerce raiding, not in direct confrontation within the Channel. The enemy's defenses are comprehensive and integrated. Any miscalculation could prove costly." The strategic implications of these assessments reverberated beyond naval circles. The Channel was not simply a maritime passage, it was a symbol of control over the invasion routes and supply lines that would shape the broader conflict. German doubts about their capacity to seize this vital corridor foreshadowed a shift in operational priorities, one that acknowledged the limits imposed by British naval dominance. In the quiet aftermath of the morning's deliberations, the officers dispersed, each carrying the weight of a sobering truth: the dream of swift victory in the English Channel was slipping further from reach. The British had transformed the narrow waters into a bastion of defense, their superiority in ships, technology, and tactics casting a long shadow over German naval ambitions. This realization marked a turning point in the Kriegsmarine's strategic calculations. The English Channel, once seen as a theater ripe for exploitation, had become a crucible where German naval power was tested against an adversary who had anticipated every move. The challenge was clear: the path to victory would demand more than boldness, it would require adaptation, patience, and the acceptance of an adversary's unyielding strength. In the weeks that followed the secret meeting aboard the Admiral, the German naval campaign in the English Channel unfolded with increasing difficulty, the challenges identified in earlier intelligence assessments manifesting with stark clarity. Operational setbacks mounted as British defenses, both naval and aerial, asserted their dominance, eroding the Kriegsmarine's capacity to maneuver effectively within the constrained waters. The initial hope for a swift and decisive victory gave way to a sobering recognition of the tactical and strategic realities that now governed the theater. One of the earliest and most telling setbacks occurred during a planned German surface raid intended to disrupt British convoy operations near the Dover Straits. Despite meticulous planning, the operation was compromised by early detection through British radar stations and prompt aerial reconnaissance. The German flotilla, composed of several torpedo boats and destroyers, found itself under sustained attack from Royal Air Force fighters and coastal artillery. "We had hoped to catch them unprepared," reported Captain Zursi Lindemann in a debriefing, but the British response was swift and overwhelming. "Our vessels were forced into retreat under heavy fire, and we sustained the loss of 2 torpedo boats. The loss, though limited in material terms, was a blow to morale and a stark illustration of the perils inherent in channel operations." Minefields further restricted German naval movements, becoming lethal obstacles that forced commanders into cautious routes and predictable patterns. The British had expanded their underwater defenses, laying extensive mine belts in strategic choke points. These minefields not only endangered German ships but also complicated planning by limiting the options available for offensive actions. "Every approach is fraught with danger," observed Oberleutnant Zursi Meyer. "Our vessels risk detonations or being funneled into kill zones where enemy patrols await." The cumulative effect of these challenges was to shift German naval tactics from aggressive engagements toward a more defensive posture. Commanders began advocating for prudence in operations, recognizing that attrition was inevitable without changes in resources or strategy. The initial confidence that had once characterized German plans was replaced by a cautious realism. Admiral Canaris himself acknowledged this shift in a private conversation with senior officers. "The Channel is no longer a battleground where we can impose our will," he stated quietly. "Without greater air support and reinforcements, we face an uphill struggle that risks unnecessary losses." His words, though measured, carried the weight of a leader grappling with the limitations imposed by circumstances beyond his control. The importance of air superiority became increasingly apparent, as British fighter patrols and bombers maintained relentless pressure on German naval movements. Several surface vessels fell victim to coordinated airstrikes, suffering damage that further reduced the operational fleet's effectiveness. The absence of adequate Luftwaffe support in the Channel region left German ships vulnerable and isolated. "Air cover is the linchpin of naval operations here," noted Captain Zursi Friedrich von Müller. "Without it, our forces are exposed to constant attack, and our strategic options narrow considerably." This growing awareness precipitated discussions within naval command circles about the feasibility of continuing direct confrontations in the Channel. The consensus leaned toward reallocating efforts toward submarine warfare in the Atlantic, where U-boats could exploit their stealth and surprise capabilities more effectively against less concentrated defenses. Simultaneously, German naval intelligence monitored British convoy routes and patrol schedules, seeking opportunities to strike. However, the effectiveness of British countermeasures, improved escort coordination, rigorous anti-submarine tactics, and persistent air reconnaissance, consistently frustrated these attempts. The British had not only anticipated German tactics but had adapted them, creating a dynamic and resilient defense network. The contrast between German expectations and operational realities was starkly illustrated in a series of engagements off the Channel coast. In one notable encounter, a German flotilla attempted to intercept a merchant convoy but was repelled by well-coordinated British destroyers and fighter aircraft. The Germans suffered damages and were forced to withdraw with no significant disruption to the convoy. These operational failures reinforced the doubts first raised during the secret meeting, highlighting the widening gap between aspiration and capability. The Kriegsmarine's surface fleet, once envisioned as a decisive instrument in the Channel campaign, was increasingly relegated to a supporting role, its effectiveness curtailed by enemy defenses and technological disadvantages. Amid these developments, Admiral Canaris and his staff began advocating for a strategic recalibration. Emphasis shifted toward preserving the fleet for engagements where it could operate with greater freedom and support, notably in the Atlantic theater. This transition acknowledged the sobering reality that victory in the Channel, under current conditions, might well be unattainable. Testimonies from officers involved in these operations reveal the growing sense of frustration. One senior officer recounted, "We entered the Channel expecting to challenge British control, but time and again, we found ourselves pushed back, our movements tracked and countered before we could act." The psychological impact on naval crews was significant. The contrast between the initial optimism and the ongoing attrition bred a cautiousness that permeated operations. Commanders became increasingly reluctant to engage unless assured of overwhelming advantage or air cover, a marked departure from the boldness that had characterized earlier phases. This tactical conservatism, while prudent, further diminished German naval initiative in the Channel. The British, conversely, exploited their defensive posture to maintain pressure, utilizing their technological edge and coordinated command structure to frustrate German efforts. The secret meeting's legacy was evident in these evolving attitudes. Canaris's early doubts, once quietly harbored, had become central to strategic discussions, shaping the Kriegsmarine's approach and priorities. Intelligence reports continued to underscore the formidable nature of British defenses, reinforcing the necessity of caution and adaptation. The cumulative effect of these setbacks and reflections was a gradual, if reluctant, acceptance within German naval command that the English Channel was not a theater where victory could be easily seized. Instead, it was a contested space where survival and attrition defined the struggle, demanding a reassessment of objectives and methods. As operations continued, the tension between ambition and reality persisted. The German Navy faced the daunting task of reconciling its limited resources with the demands of an increasingly hostile and well-defended maritime environment. The secret meeting aboard the Admiral had marked the beginning of this reckoning, a moment when hope yielded to the sobering demands of strategic necessity. Admiral Wilhelm Canaris's reflections in the aftermath of the English Channel campaign bore the weight of a profound change in naval doctrine and strategic outlook. The secret meeting aboard the Admiral, months earlier, had ushered in a new era of cautious realism within the Kriegsmarine's highest echelons, an acknowledgement that the initial confidence in swift victory had been misplaced. This shift in perspective not only altered immediate operational priorities but also left an indelible mark on the broader conduct of the German naval war effort. As the Channel campaign settled into an uneasy stalemate, Canaris's influence guided a reorientation of focus toward the Atlantic theater, where U-boat warfare promised a more viable avenue for exerting pressure on British maritime supply lines. The Admiral's recognition of the limitations imposed by British naval and air superiority in the Channel underscored a critical strategic pivot. Direct confrontation in the Channel was no longer the principal means of undermining British power at sea. The decision to concentrate our efforts on submarine warfare was not born of defeatism, Canaris explained in a later interrogation report. It was a sober appraisal of our strengths and the enemy's capabilities. We sought to exploit the areas where we held advantage rather than persist in a costly contest where the odds were stacked against us. This strategic recalibration was reflected in the allocation of resources and the planning of naval operations. Increased investment in U-boat production, enhanced training for submarine crews, and the development of Wolfpack tactics signified a deliberate shift away from surface fleet engagements in heavily defended waters. The Kriegsmarine's surface vessels were relegated to secondary roles or redeployed to less contested theaters, a testament to the hard-earned lessons from the Channel. Historians have noted that this transformation in naval strategy was as much a product of intelligence-driven realism as it was of battlefield necessity. The secret meeting had exposed the vulnerabilities in German naval assumptions, prompting a more critical evaluation of what could be achieved given the realities of British defenses. Intelligence reports, intercepted communications, and reconnaissance data all contributed to a clearer understanding that the Channel was a formidable barrier rather than a mere obstacle. Lieutenant Commander Hans Richter, a naval historian specializing in the Kriegsmarine's operations, observed, "The secret meeting and its aftermath illustrate how intelligence and strategic analysis can profoundly influence military planning." The German Navy's initial underestimation of British capabilities gave way to a more nuanced approach, shaped by the hard facts revealed through clandestine assessments. The impact on morale within the naval command was complex. While the initial shock of the secret meeting's revelations sowed doubt and uncertainty, the subsequent adoption of a more pragmatic strategy helped restore a measure of confidence. By focusing on submarine warfare, German naval leaders embraced a form of combat better suited to their strengths, allowing them to continue the fight with renewed purpose, albeit in a different arena. Yet, the legacy of the secret meeting also carried a somber undertone. It underscored the limits of German naval power and the supremacy of Allied intelligence and technological innovation. The Channel campaign's stalemate was not simply a tactical impasse but a reflection of broader strategic realities, where intelligence, air superiority, and technological integration decisively shaped the outcome. The meeting's significance extended beyond tactical adjustments. It symbolized a moment when the Kriegsmarine confronted the harsh truths of its strategic environment. The Admiral's quiet doubts, once confined to private discussions, became a catalyst for change that influenced naval operations for the remainder of the war. Victory in the Channel was no longer assured after that night, Canaris later remarked. It became clear that our future successes would depend on recognizing our limitations and adapting accordingly. This measured resignation was echoed by other participants. Captain zur See Friedrich von Müller reflected, "We had to accept that the enemy's defenses were more robust than anticipated." The secret meeting was a turning point. It forced us to rethink our approach and to prioritize survival and effectiveness over grand ambitions. The episode also illuminated the vital role of intelligence in shaping wartime decision-making. The German naval command's ability to gather, analyze, and act upon sensitive information determined the course of the campaign and highlighted the interplay between information and power. The British, too, benefited from their intelligence networks, reinforcing the notion that maritime supremacy was as much about knowledge and anticipation as it was about firepower. In the final analysis, the secret meeting aboard the Admiral Scheer stands as a poignant example of how wartime realities can dismantle illusions of invincibility. It reveals the struggle within German naval command to reconcile ambition with capability, and the eventual embrace of a strategy grounded in empirical assessment rather than hopeful projection. The somber reflections of Admiral Canaris and his officers encapsulate the profound transformation wrought by that clandestine encounter. It was a moment when confidence was shaken, doubts emerged, and the course of the German naval war effort was irrevocably altered. The English Channel remained contested, but the Kriegsmarine's approach had shifted, marked by caution, realism, and a hard-won respect for the enemy's enduring strength. If you loved the story, like the video and subscribe.